seated. My name is Greg Rochelle, and I'm honored to introduce Charles Wood, father of the late Tyrone Woods, who fought valiantly in the Battle of Benghazi. Mr. Wood traveled across the country to join with us in tribute to his son, Tyrone, and Tyrone's comrades in arms in Benghazi. Thank you, Mr. Wood.
First of all, I'd like to thank all of you for gathering here today. There are those people that would want the American public to forget about what happened in Benghazi, but it's people like you that have kept the memory alive. It's people like you that have kept the issue of Benghazi from being swept under the rug. So I have to thank all of you. Thank you for being here, and thank you for the work you're doing. You know, there's a question, a very famous question that was asked. What difference does Benghazi make? You all know the answer to that. There's one question that has not been answered satisfactorily to me as the father of Ty Woods, and that is, why was there no rescue attempt? The day before yesterday, I talked with one of our honorable congressmen, that'd be Jason Chaffetz, and 20 days after Benghazi happened, he was so interested in what happened that he made a personal trip with Carter Ham, the general in charge of AFRICOM at the time, back to Benghazi. And he asked him on several occasions, and the answer was always the same. I had the assets immediately available in the area, but I was never given the order to deploy. I would like to know who made that decision not to rescue my son and the others who perished in Benghazi. Eventually the truth will come out, and it's people like you that are going to make sure that that happens. So thank you. Thank you for everything you've done for my family. Where do we start? First of all, this tie that I'm wearing, this is the tie that I wore at my son's funeral. And on the anniversary of Benghazi, this is what I wear to honor him. 2,000 years ago, there was a man who said, greater love has no one than he lay down his life for another. That was Ty. In fact, every one of you veterans, that's what you have subscribed to. Because that is what love is not living for yourself, but living for others. Living for your spouse, living for your children, living for what's best for your country, and being willing to lay down your life for each one of you. So I am actually very, very humbled to be in your presence, because all of you veterans, all of you who are active duty, that's the example that you have led by. So thank you. You know, it's really a privilege being here in Jacksonville. My daughter, that'd be Ty's sister, we got up about 4:30 this morning while most of you were still sleeping, and we went down to the beach. And we noticed something that was really interesting. I'd never seen this happen before. Back in Oregon or back in Hawaii, we live actually both places. When you see a seagull, they're very selfish. They fight, they try and take food away from each other. We actually saw two seagulls down there today, and one seagull had food in its mouth, and it went over, and it gave that food to another seagull. I guess that's Southern hospitality. And that's one of the things that we have really noticed here. In fact, my daughter mentioned that, is everyone here is so nice to each other. So it's really a privilege being here. I'd like to start off by just saying who Ty is, and I use the word is, because eternal life has been promised to some of us. In fact, to all of us, it's been promised. I was married when I was 19, and while I was in law school, my wife, Ty's mom, was in labor during final exams. We lived on 20 acres on a farm out in the Tualatin River, and it was snowing heavily. Normally it doesn't do that in that part of Oregon, but the snow was coming down so hard that I had to borrow a neighbor's four-wheel drive International Harvester truck in order to get up to the law school on the hill. It was snowing. I was hoping my professor would let me out of the final exam. He wouldn't. He said, but you can take your wife and go in the library and do the final exam. She started going into contractions. Needless to say, I didn't finish my final exam. And when we brought him home, there's what's called a Chinook. It's a real warm wind combined with warm rain, melted this massive amount of snow. We had to take a rowboat to get back to the house. So Ty's birth was very auspicious, and he was definitely a very special man. And hopefully he'll be a role model for many others. When these things happen, we realize that all things do work towards good. And somehow, some good is going to come out of his death. Ty absolutely loved this country. That's why he voluntarily chose to serve for 20 years as a Navy SEAL. And the country that he loved 20-some years ago when he signed up isn't the country that we see today. And hopefully maybe one of those good things that will happen as a result of his death will be that pendulum will swing back the direction that he would want it to be as far as our country is concerned. When the bodies were flown back to Washington, D.C. from Benghazi, I had the privilege of staying in a hotel where many of Ty's Navy SEAL friends were also staying. And we had the opportunity to stay up late that night in the lobby at the hotel. They'd tell stories about Ty, and they'd ask me to tell a story about Ty, and we'd go back and forth. And there's a few stories I'd like to share with you. One was about Ty. They kept talking about how every Navy SEAL, are there any Navy SEALs here? Or Special Forces? Special Forces. All of the Special Forces are the same. Those who are in the Special Forces, I was told, are alpha males. And his friends, the SEALs, they said he was an alpha SEAL. He trained other SEALs, and he was the pinnacle. He was the SEAL that others wanted to be like. And hopefully his death will inspire other people to step up and to take his place and to become role models the way he was. One of the things that they mentioned about him was his integrity. All of you know integrity is something that our country very desperately needs now. And they made this statement, told a story about someone who was in charge of Ty. Ty was in charge of his team. Told him a lie. And he confronted about that person. And he says, you jeopardized my team by not telling me the truth. They told me that Ty was one of the strongest Navy SEALs. They said he could bench press over 500 pounds. Obviously, there's such a thing as recessive genes that skip a generation. But he does have a brother who won state in shot put 2 years in a row. He has a college scholarship. And I'll tell you about him later. But what Ty did, he took that person, even though he was a superior in rank, he took that person by the neck and suspended him up. And these weren't his exact words. He used SEAL language. But he said, don't ever lie to me again. That was Ty's ethos. He would use the words smoke and mirrors. He did not allow smoke and mirrors. And if he were alive today, and if he watched the lies that certain people have told about Benghazi in order to cover up their wrongdoing, I know all of you here want what is best for our country, and you know what is best for our country. There's a certain person that asks the question, what difference does Benghazi make? You all know the answer to that question. And I'm sure that if Ty was here today, there are certain people that he figuratively would like to hold up and say, no more smoke and mirrors. We want the truth. I'll tell you something else about Ty. And most people know about this. Ty, even though he was raised in the big city, Portland, Oregon, when he was fairly young, in fact, before he even started school, we had the opportunity to move to a 9,000-acre ranch in eastern Oregon. I was an administrative law judge, and I had basically jurisdiction over the rural part of eastern Oregon. We would hold hearings in one county, and then another county, and then another county. So we had the privilege of living on this ranch. And from a very early age, I mean, we're talking like 5 years old, we'd give him a box of 22 shells and a 22 rifle, and we'd turn him loose. He'd go out shooting ground squirrels, and when he got hungry, he always knew where the house was. And that was one of the things that made him into a SEAL. Taught him a lot of things. Taught him how to take responsibility for his actions. Told him how to be mature, even at an early age, how to make right decisions. It also honed his pointing instincts. We'd take him down to the county fair, and you know how they have those little booths with the little rifles and the prizes? He'd come back, he'd clean up. There were so many things in his life, one thing after another. He was made to be a Navy SEAL. He was one of the better wrestlers in Oregon. Could have gone to college and done that. But he said, Dad, I'm going into the Navy, and this is not to scrape barnacles off the bottom of a ship. It's to be a Navy SEAL. And he didn't like boot camp. He thought that was a waste of time. And he noticed, this is what the SEALs told me. He noticed that the SEALs were swimming, and he was quite a good swimmer. He'd spent time over in Hawaii as a teenager, learned to surf and swim over there. And so he had one of his buddies call out his name at roll call. He went over to where the SEALs were swimming and showed him what he could do. They liked what he could do, but more important than that, they liked his attitude. That was the attitude he had as a Navy SEAL. For those of you in the Special Forces, you know what I mean. You have that attitude as well. And he served 20 years. And once you're a SEAL, it's always in your blood. It's what you like to do even after you retire. They wanted to make him an officer, but he didn't want to be an officer because he loved working with his men. And he didn't want to give that up. And even after he retired, occasionally they'd call him up and they'd say, we have a job, an assignment we'd like you to do. And he'd call up and say, well, Dad, I'm going on a business trip to the Middle East or something like that. Can't tell you when I'm getting back, but I'm leaving in an hour. The last time I talked with Ty, he said, Dad, I'm going on a mission. And I told him, I says, Ty, during the 20 years that you were in, I never really worried about anything serious happening to you, even though I did pray for your safety. But I said, Ty, this time I feel completely different. If there's any way you can get out of it, do. And he said, don't worry, Dad. Can't tell you who I'm working for. CIA, State Department. But they never like to lose anyone, so don't worry, Dad. And I told him, Ty, really be careful. Really be careful. Unfortunately, he had a brand new baby that was just a couple months old when he passed. He had already told them, this is the last assignment that I'm going to take. I have responsibilities, can't do any more. In fact, he was supposed to have come back home, and there was someone else that wanted to go elk hunting with his dad in Washington. And Ty said, go spend time with your dad elk hunting. Ty and I, we went hunting, when he was young. I think he was 5 years old the first time I ever took him out hunting. So he could relate to that. And he says, I'll take your place. He was scheduled to go home in 6 more days after he extended his time. That would have been his last assignment. I'm sure that on numerous times, probably hundreds of times, he was probably in worse situations than this as far as danger was concerned. But part of being in the military, as all of you know, with no exceptions, when your mission is compromised, they always, always rescue. That did not happen this time, and it wasn't an accident. Someone prevented that rescue. Hopefully, that information one of these days will be made public. And I've already forgiven the person. But we do need to have the truth, and we do need to have justice. As you know, Ty was raised on a ranch, and a week ago, in a little town of Lostine, Oregon, which most of you have never heard of, there's a rancher who's very patriotic, and every so often he has a group of military people come out and enjoy the ranch that he's been blessed with. And there was a group of about 30 snipers. Some of them were active duty, some of them were veterans like you that were there. And they invited me out there because one of the things that does bring comfort to me after losing my son is being around people that had the same ethos, that had the same life experiences, that were like Ty, that looked like Ty. And almost all of these men either had worked with Ty, had known about Ty, or who might have had a brother that worked with Ty. And it was really comforting to be with them. And this was just Saturday, a week ago. And I told them that this week I'd be speaking to a large group of veterans that I'd never done that before. And I asked them, what should I tell this group of veterans? And they gathered around, and they gave me suggestions. And mentally I was making notes. And 3 of the things that they told me was this, was first of all, as a veteran, your service does not end when you leave the military. They said, encourage these veterans to continue to serve their country. And I thank you for doing that. And part of your interest here in what happened in Benghazi is part of that service for the good of this country. The other thing that they said was that there's good things and bad things that happen to us. We may have been raised in the wrong neighborhood. There may have been things that happened to us in the military. But use that positively. That's part of your story. That's not an excuse. So use your service, your experiences as a veteran to continue to serve this country. The third thing they said was advise these veterans not to just think of themselves, but to think of what they can do for others. Because really, that is the definition of love. Not living for yourself, living for your spouse, living for your children, living for what's best for your country. That's what love is, living for others. How has Ty's death affected our family? Quite frankly, I would rather be in Hawaii or Oregon with my family, I have a second chance family. I'm one of those really blessed men. And all of my children, I'm very, very proud of. And I'd much rather be anonymous, raising my children obscurely, but this happened. Now, some people in their family, when they lose a family member, they withdraw. That didn't happen in our family. Ty had a son who was named after him, Ty Jr., who just graduated from high school. As soon as this happened, within a couple of weeks, guess what he did? He went down to the recruiter, signed up for the Navy. Ty has a brother, Jeremiah, who is a pre-med student. As soon as this happened, guess what he did? He called up the Navy, says, I'm going to be a doctor. Ty had the skills of an emergency room doctor. Every one of the teams that went out, they had people that had the capability of bringing back the wounded. That was Ty. And so Jeremiah was already on track to be a doctor. In fact, he's going to be accepted to medical school within the next couple of months. And basically, he made, at that time, the decision to do that. He's debating whether to go Navy or Air Force. Both of them are excellent choices. I'm an administrative law judge that's retired. And as soon as this happened, I called up the JAG Corps. And they said, sorry, we have an age requirement. And I said, if you will waive the age requirement, I said, I just got through running a marathon. I can take care of boot camp if you'll waive the age requirement. And I talked to Jen McCain. I talked to Lindsey Graham, who happens to be patriotic. He's a member of the reserve. Even had a number of people trying to get someone up above to waive that age requirement. And quite frankly, when, you notice I'm saying when, not if, Mr. Trump becomes our commander-in-chief, if I ever have the chance to talk to him, I'm going to say, will you please waive that age requirement? When our family loses a member, we have 3 more, in fact, possibly, my daughter, Hope, possibly 4, that step forward to take that one replacement place. That's one of the ways our family's been impacted. Hopefully, Ty's life will impact others to be American heroes, in or out of the military, in whatever occupation, in whatever life choices they make. Part of the reason for that is in this world today, we have a lack of leadership role models. Each one of you as veterans are role models for those people around you, for your children, for your grandchildren, for your neighbors. You are role models. You are men and women to be respected. Now I'm curious, I'd like to show of hands on this. How many people here have the privilege of being married to a spouse that was willing to fight and die for their family and for their country? I'd like a show of hands. I'd like you guys to look at your spouse. Look at your spouse and realize how thankful you are that you have someone that's willing to fight for their loved ones and for their country. Thank you.